The morning light filtered through the stained glass windows of the cathedral like liquid amber, casting dancing shadows across the weathered stone floor, where countless souls had knelt in prayer throughout the centuries. Sister Elena stood at the altar's edge, her hands trembling as she held the ancient manuscript that had been entrusted to her by the dying Bishop Marcellus, her heart heavy with the weight of divine mystery that seemed to pulse through the very air itself. The parchment, yellowed with age and kissed by countless prayers, contained words that would either save or damn the soul of a young man who had been chosen by God's mysterious design to bear the burden of ultimate sacrifice. In the distance, the bells of the neighboring monastery tolled with mournful precision, each chime echoing through the sacred space like a call from the beyond. Elena closed her eyes and felt the presence of the Almighty pressing against her consciousness, a warmth that transcended mortal understanding, yet simultaneously revealed the depth of her own inadequacy. She was but a vessel, a fragile clay vessel, and the weight of the sacred message within her trembling hands threatened to crush her spirit beneath its magnitude. The manuscript spoke of a chosen one, a soul marked by destiny to carry within his being the very essence of divine love, and the profound darkness that opposed it. Elena had read the words countless times, yet each reading revealed new layers of meaning, each page a window into the cosmic drama that unfolded between light and shadow, between salvation and damnation. The young man's name was Marcus, though she dared not speak it aloud even in her own thoughts, for to pronounce it might invoke forces beyond human comprehension. As she studied the ancient script, Elena felt the familiar ache of spiritual longing that accompanied every encounter with divine mysteries. Her soul yearned to understand why God would choose such a burden for one so young, so innocent, so filled with the potential for joy and love that seemed to radiate from his very being. The manuscript described him as one who would be tested beyond measure, whose heart would be stretched to its limits by the weight of hatred he would inevitably carry within him. The words were clear and unambiguous. The hate you carry will destroy you. Let go and embrace divine love. But how could one let go of hatred that had been woven into the very fabric of his existence? How could one surrender the dark power that had been bestowed upon him, knowing that it was the only force that could stand against the encroaching darkness that threatened to consume all that was good and holy in this world? Elena felt tears streaming down her cheeks as she realized the terrible paradox of divine grace. The more one sought to embrace love, the more one was forced to confront the depth of hatred that existed within creation itself. The cathedral grew silent except for the gentle sound of her own breathing, and in that profound quiet she heard the voice of God speaking directly to her soul. Not in words, but in the overwhelming presence of infinite compassion that seemed to fill every corner of the sacred space. She understood now that the chosen one's journey was not merely about accepting or rejecting hatred, but about transforming it through the power of divine love. The manuscript spoke of a moment when all would be revealed, when the young man would face his ultimate test and discover that true strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the capacity to forgive. Elena's hands shook as she carefully folded the precious document, knowing that she carried within her the responsibility of guiding another soul toward enlightenment. The weight of this sacred trust pressed upon her chest like a physical burden, yet she felt the gentle touch of the divine spirit lifting her spirit above the ordinary concerns of mortal existence. In that moment, she understood that the chosen one's path would be paved with suffering, but also with the promise of transcendence. The hatred he would carry was not meant to consume him, but to ultimately transform him into a vessel of divine mercy. As the first rays of sunlight touched the altar, Elena felt the presence of God's love surrounding her like a protective cloak, and she whispered a prayer that would echo through eternity. Lord, grant me the wisdom to guide those who walk the narrow path between darkness and light. The weight of chosenness pressed upon her chest like a stone carved from the very heart of divine sorrow. each breath a struggle between the sacred calling and the darkness that had taken root within her soul. Elena stood at the threshold of her grandmother's cottage where the morning light filtered through gauze curtains like golden prayers, and the air itself seemed to hold the whispered secrets of ages past. The mirror before her reflected not just her face, but the fractured essence of a woman who had been blessed with visions and cursed with the burden of prophecy. She had seen the visions, oh how she had seen them. The great wheel of fate turning with terrible precision, each spoke representing a life, a choice, a moment of divine intervention that would either heal or destroy. The crimson threads that connected all souls weaving through the tapestry of existence had revealed themselves to her eyes like rivers of blood and light flowing toward a convergence point where the old world would end and the new begin. And she, Elena, daughter of the chosen line-bearer of the ancient blood, had been marked for sacrifice. The hatred burned within her like a fire that could never be extinguished by earthly means. It had begun as a whisper in her youth, a shadow that followed her through the corridors of memory and dreams. Her father's murder at the hands of those who sought to steal the family's sacred knowledge had planted seeds of vengeance that grew into something monstrous, something that consumed her very essence. The pain had become her companion, her constant lover, and she had learned to feed it, to nurture it, to make it a part of herself until it became indistinguishable from her own heartbeat. But now, as she stood in this place of memory and prayer, she felt the gentle fingers of divine mercy reaching through the veil of her suffering. The Holy Spirit, that ineffable presence that dwells in the spaces between heartbeats, began to work its quiet miracle upon her hardened soul. She saw the truth that had been hidden beneath layers of rage and resentment. The truth that hatred was not a weapon but a prison, not a shield but a tomb. The visions had shown her what was coming, and they had also shown her the path of redemption that lay hidden behind the mountain of her own making. She had been chosen not merely to bear witness to the great transformation, but to embody the very love that would transmute the world's pain into healing light. The divine plan was not one of destruction, but of transformation, not of retribution, but of restoration. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the world held its breath between night and day, she began to understand the nature of her calling. She was to be a vessel, a conduit for the love that flows from the throne of heaven to the earth below. The hate she carried had been given to her not as punishment, but as a test of faith, a crucible in which her spirit might be refined until it shone with the pure radiance of divine grace. The words of the ancient scripture echoed in her heart. "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God." She realized that her chosenness was not about wielding power over others, but about becoming a living testament to the power of forgiveness, about showing the world that even the deepest wounds can be transformed into sources of strength and hope. As the first rays of sunlight touched her face, she felt the chains of her hatred beginning to dissolve like ice before the warmth of spring. The divine love that had always been there, waiting patiently in the depths of her soul, began to flow outward in waves of healing light that touched everything she had ever loved and everything she had ever feared. In that moment of surrender, she understood that she was no longer the victim of circumstance, but the author of her own redemption, the living embodiment of a love that conquers all. The weight of the world pressed upon her shoulders like the heavy burden of 1,000 fallen angels, each one carrying the sins of humanity in their crystalline wings that had been broken by the very love they sought to spread. Elena stood at the threshold of the ancient cathedral, its stained glass windows casting prismatic prayers across the stone floor, where generations of souls had knelt in repentance and received the mercy that no mortal hand could bestow. The air itself seemed to shimmer with the accumulated grace of countless confessions, each whispered, secret, and hidden sorrow, becoming threads in the tapestry of divine forgiveness that wove through the very fabric of this sacred space. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird desperate to escape the prison of flesh, each beat echoing the rhythm of her own spiritual warfare. The visions had come to her in dreams that bordered on the realm of pure revelation, images of a cosmic battle fought not with swords or fire, but with the raw materials of human consciousness itself. She saw the shadowy figures that dwelled in the spaces between heartbeats, entities born from the collective hatred of mankind, feeding upon the darkness that lurked in every corner of human experience. They were not merely imaginary constructs, but living things that existed in the spaces between what was and what could be, drawing sustenance from the pain that flowed like rivers through the valleys of human suffering. The voice that spoke to her in the silence of her chamber was not the whisper of wind through ancient corridors, but the resonant frequency of eternity itself, speaking in tongues that transcended language and reached directly into the core of her being. "Chosen one," it said, and the word carried the weight of prophecy and the promise of redemption. "The hate you carry will destroy you." The words struck her like lightning, illuminating the truth she had been too afraid to acknowledge, too wounded to face, too exhausted to resist. The burden she bore was not simply her own pain, but the accumulated sorrows of humanity, the weight of unspoken griefs, and the crushing load of forgotten love. She had become a vessel for the world's despair, her soul a chalice that held the bitter wine of human anguish. And now she understood that the only way to break the cycle was to offer up the very thing that had been keeping her bound, the hatred that had grown within her, like a cancer consuming everything in its path until nothing remained but ash and memory. The divine plan was not to eliminate suffering, but to transform it, to take the darkness that had been her companion and turn it into light, to use the very fuel of her pain to kindle the eternal flame that burned in the hearts of all who would listen. In that moment, as the sun's golden rays streamed through the cathedral windows like liquid fire, she felt the presence of something greater than herself. Something that had been waiting patiently for this moment when she would finally understand that true strength came not from the power to destroy, but from the courage to forgive. The divine love that had been calling to her since childhood, that had been whispering promises in the spaces between her breaths, was not meant to be received, but shared, not kept, but given away until the entire world became a sanctuary for the healing that only comes from the recognition that we are all children of the same infinite source. The weight began to lift, not because the pain disappeared, but because she finally understood that the pain was not hers alone, that the burden of hatred she carried was part of a larger story, one that would be written in the language of redemption rather than revenge. She closed her eyes and let the divine presence flow through her like a river of mercy, washing away the residue of anger that had been poisoning her spirit, leaving behind only the pure essence of love that had been there all along, waiting patiently for her to remember who she truly was. The sacred fire within her chest began to burn with an intensity that made her knees tremble, though she stood upon the mountaintop, where the heavens themselves seemed to lean closer to hear her confession. The wind carried whispers of ancient prophecies, each breath a prayer that tasted of both salt and sanctity, as if the very air had been blessed by the fingers of God himself. She pressed her palms against the rough stone beneath her feet, feeling the pulse of the earth's heartbeat, the slow, rhythmic drumming that spoke of eternity itself. Chosen one. The voice came not from her ears, but from somewhere deeper, from the chambers of her soul, where the divine and mortal intertwined like lovers bound by fate. The hate you carry will destroy you. The words struck her like lightning, not the kind that illuminates the sky, but the kind that strikes the heart and leaves it forever changed. She felt the weight of her burden pressing down upon her shoulders. Years of pain, of betrayal, of the darkness that had taken root in her spirit like a poisonous vine that would not be uprooted. The memories flooded back with the force of a rushing river, the faces of those who had broken her, the words that had cut her soul to pieces, the silence that had followed when she had begged for forgiveness that never came. But now, standing here in this sacred space where the veil between worlds grew thin as morning mist, she understood something profound that had eluded her for so many years. The hatred had been her prison, her chains, her curse wrapped around her heart like a serpent's embrace. She had believed that anger was strength, that bitterness was justice, that the fire of vengeance would light her way through the darkness. But what she had not known was that she had become the very thing she sought to destroy her own self. Fragmented and broken, trapped in cycles of pain that would never end until she found the courage to release them all. The hate you carry, the voice continued, gentle yet insistent, as a mother's hand on a child's shoulder, will destroy you. And suddenly she saw it clearly. The path that led to her destruction was paved with every wrong that had ever been done to her, every wound that had never healed, every prayer that had gone unanswered. She had become a vessel of retribution, a walking monument to the wounds that time could not mend. But then in that moment of perfect clarity, she felt something shift within her breast, a stirring of something older and more powerful than the pain that had defined her existence. It was the presence of the divine love that had been waiting patiently like a patient lover who had endured centuries of separation, ready to embrace her again with arms wide enough to encompass all the brokenness of the world. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, drawing in the sacred air that tasted of incense and hope of redemption and rebirth. The love that had been hidden behind layers of hurt and anger began to seep through the cracks in her heart like water finding its way through stone, nourishing the dry ground of her soul and bringing forth flowers of peace that had never known the soil of suffering. "Let go," the voice whispered, now tender as a lullaby, "and embrace the divine love that has always been yours, that has always waited for you to return to it." And as she opened her eyes, she saw the mountain before her, beginning to glow with a soft, ethereal light. Not the harsh radiance of the sun, but the warm, golden glow of grace itself, as if the very stones were celebrating her liberation from the chains of bitterness that had bound her spirit for so long. In that sacred moment, she understood that her mission was not to destroy her enemies or claim victory over her pain, but to become a living testament to the power of forgiveness, a bridge between the darkness and the light, a vessel through which the divine mercy might flow into the world and heal the wounds that had seemed too deep to mend. The weight of the world pressed upon her shoulders like the heavy mantle of prophecy itself, each step forward through the sacred corridors of her destiny echoing with the footsteps of generations who had walked this same path before her. Elena's heart thundered against her ribs as she felt the divine whispering in her soul, a voice that transcended mortal comprehension yet spoke directly to her very essence. The ancient texts had foretold this moment, the prophetic scrolls that had been preserved through centuries of persecution, their golden letters shimmering with holy light even now, as she read them by candlelight in the dim sanctuary where the faithful gathered to seek solace. She was the chosen one, selected from among countless souls by a divine hand that had guided her journey from birth, when her mother had carried her through the sacred groves, where the trees themselves seemed to lean in reverence, their leaves rustling with secrets whispered only to those pure of heart. The visions had come to her in dreams, visions of fire and water, of darkness and light dancing together in eternal communion, of a great awakening that would transform the very fabric of existence itself. She had seen the faces of the lost, their eyes filled with longing for redemption, their hearts heavy with the burden of their own hatred and fear. The hate she carried within her chest was not her own. It was the accumulated weight of human suffering, the collective grief of every person who had ever been wronged, every soul that had turned away from love and embraced bitterness instead. It pressed down upon her like a physical thing, manifesting as shadows that danced at the edges of her vision, whispers of despair that sought to consume her very being. She could feel them there, the echoes of every act of cruelty, every betrayal, every moment of unkindness that had ever been committed upon this earth, all swirling together in a maelstrom of negative energy that threatened to drown her spirit. But the divine love that flowed through her veins was stronger than any darkness. She had learned to hear its song in the gentle rustle of autumn leaves, in the way morning light filtered through stained glass windows, in the tender touch of a hand placed upon her shoulder by someone who understood that she was not alone in her burden. This love was not merely an emotion, but a force of creation itself, a divine energy that had shaped galaxies and breathed life into the first human heart. It was the same love that had sent Jesus to earth, that had called Moses from his shepherd's life, that had inspired the prophets to speak truths that would change the course of history. She knew now that her mission was not to destroy the sources of hatred, but to transform them through the power of divine compassion. The hate she carried would indeed destroy her if she allowed it to fester unchecked, but she also understood that she was meant to be a vessel through which healing could flow. Each person whose pain she touched, each soul she helped to see beyond their own suffering, was another step toward the greater purpose that had called her here. The words of the ancient scripture echoed in her mind. "I have loved you with an everlasting love. I have drawn you with loving kindness." She had been chosen not because she was perfect, but because she was willing to embrace her imperfections and transform them through the grace that flowed from above. Her calling was not to be a warrior of destruction, but a healer of hearts, a bridge between the human and the divine, a living testament to the power of love to overcome even the deepest wounds. As she stood in the sacred space where the divine and mortal worlds met, Elena felt the weight of eternity pressing upon her shoulders, and yet she found herself smiling not with triumph, but with profound gratitude for the privilege of being chosen to carry the sacred burden. The hate that threatened to consume her was not her enemy, but a teacher showing her the depth of human need and the magnitude of the love that was required to heal it. She would let go of her anger, not by suppressing it, but by transforming it into the very force that would ultimately save the world. The sacred flame within her chest pulsed with an intensity that made her gasp, each breath drawing in the very essence of divine fire that had been kindled there since that fateful night when she first felt the weight of prophecy settle upon her shoulders like a crown of thorns. The visions came not as whispers, but as thunderous revelations, each one a testament to the cosmic dance between light and shadow, between the sacred and the profane, between the chosen and the condemned. She had walked through the valley of the shadow of death, had touched the very edge of eternity itself, and emerged forever changed, her soul bearing the scars of divine calling like ancient tattoos of gold that would never fade. The hatred that had taken root in her heart during those dark months of torment was not merely human anger. It was a living thing, a serpent coiled around her very being, feeding on the bitter fruits of injustice and pain that had been inflicted upon her beloved people. She had seen the faces of the innocent slaughtered, had heard their cries echo through the corridors of heaven itself, had felt their blood staining the earth like crimson prayer beads that spoke to the Almighty of suffering that could no longer be ignored. The weight of their collective anguish pressed down upon her like the burden of the cross. Yet it was not this suffering that had forged her into the vessel she now was. It was the love that had emerged from the ashes of that pain. The divine love that refused to be extinguished even by the most consuming flames of hatred. In the deepest chambers of her soul, where the divine presence dwelled in its purest form, she felt the gentle hand of the Almighty guiding her toward the path of redemption that lay before her. The voice that spoke to her was not one of judgment, but of profound compassion. A voice that carried the weight of infinite mercy and understood the terrible price that must be paid for true salvation. "Child of light," it whispered, "the darkness you carry within you is not your own. Take it not as a weapon, but as a bridge, and let it lead you to the place where all things may be reconciled." The spiritual mission that had been entrusted to her was not one of conquest or retribution, but of transformation, a call to become the living embodiment of divine love in a world that had forgotten how to love itself. Each step she took along the sacred path was measured in acts of mercy. Each breath drawn was an offering of forgiveness. Each heartbeat was a prayer for the healing of broken hearts and the restoration of shattered souls. She had learned that true strength came not from the sword, but from the willingness to lay it down. Not from the power to destroy, but from the grace to forgive. As she stood at the threshold of her destiny, the weight of the chosen one's burden pressed upon her like a mantle of celestial fire. Yet she felt no fear, only the deep, abiding peace that comes from knowing that she was not alone in her suffering, that every tear shed in service to the divine was captured by heaven itself and transformed into something beautiful beyond mortal comprehension. The hate that had once consumed her was now being transmuted into something far more powerful, the capacity to love even those who had caused her the greatest pain, to see the divine spark in every creature, regardless of their actions, to understand that the very act of choosing love over hate was the ultimate victory over the forces of darkness that sought to consume the world. In that moment of perfect clarity, she understood that she had been chosen not to carry the weight of vengeance, but to bear the light of divine mercy, not to speak words of condemnation, but to whisper promises of redemption, not to build walls of separation, but to tear down the barriers that divided humanity from itself and from the source of all love. The divine mandate that had been placed upon her shoulders was not a curse, but a blessing, not a prison, but a calling to become the living expression of the love that flows from the heart of God to all creatures, regardless of their past or present circumstances. The weight of divine calling pressed upon her chest like the ancient stones of a cathedral sanctuary, each breath a prayer that seemed to echo through the very foundations of heaven itself. Sarah's hands trembled as she held the sacred scroll, its golden letters shimmering with an otherworldly luminescence that spoke not merely of words, but of the very essence of divine will. The parchment pulsed with warmth against her palms, a gentle reminder that she was chosen not for her strength, but for her capacity to surrender completely to the will of the Almighty. In the flickering candlelight of the abandoned chapel, shadows danced across the weathered walls like specters of forgotten prayers, each one a testament to the countless souls who had walked this path before her. The air itself seemed to thicken with holy presence, thick as incense and sweet as morning dew, making her knees buckle with reverence and awe. She could feel the eyes of saints and martyrs upon her, their collective prayers forming a canopy of light that stretched beyond the mortal realm into the infinite tapestry of divine purpose. The words of the scroll seemed to breathe within her consciousness, speaking not just of the burden she carried, but of the redemption that awaited those brave enough to embrace their calling. "The hate you carry," they whispered, each syllable a caress from the divine itself, "will destroy you. Let go and embrace divine love." The very sound of those words sent ripples of spiritual recognition through her soul, awakening memories of childhood prayers that had been buried beneath years of doubt and despair. Sarah's heart ached with a longing so profound it felt like being torn apart by the very love that sought to heal her. She had spent so many nights wrestling with the darkness within her own heart, the hatred that had grown like poison in her breast since that terrible night when her family had been taken from her. The pain had become her companion, her armor, her very identity. Yet now she understood that it was also her prison, a cage of her own making, that had kept her from experiencing the fullness of divine grace. The chapel fell silent, except for the soft crackling of candles, And in that silence, she heard the voice of her Savior speaking directly to her spirit, his words carrying the weight of eternity. "My child," he said, his voice like the rustling of leaves in a sacred grove. "You have been chosen not because you are worthy, but because I am faithful. Not because your heart is pure, but because I will make it so." The words filled her with both terror and trembling joy, for she knew that true freedom came only through complete surrender to the divine will. As she knelt upon the cold stone floor, her tears falling like precious gems onto the ancient wooden boards, she felt the weight of her past begin to lift. The hatred that had consumed her for so many years began to dissolve like morning mist before the rising sun, replaced by something far more powerful, a burning desire to forgive, to heal, to become the vessel through which divine love might flow into a world that desperately needed redemption. The scroll in her hands grew warm again, pulsing with the rhythm of her heartbeat, and she understood that her mission was not simply to bear witness to God's love, but to become living proof of it, a beacon of hope in the darkness of human suffering. The divine light that had been growing within her chest now burst forth in a radiance so intense it made her squint, and she knew that she had finally found her way home, not to a place but to a state of being, where the boundaries between self and divine merged into perfect unity. The weight of the world pressed upon her shoulders like the heavy mantle of prophecy itself, each step forward through the shadowed corridors of her destiny, feeling like a prayer whispered into the void. Elena's heart thundered against her ribs as she walked the sacred path that had been laid before her, her feet carrying her toward the threshold where the divine and mortal realms converged in a dance of fire and light. The ancient text spoke of this moment of the chosen one, who would carry the burden of hatred that had festered for centuries within the hearts of men, a hatred so deep and consuming that it could only be purified by the purest love that had ever existed. She felt it now, that familiar burning in her chest, the same fire that had first ignited when she had first glimpsed the vision of the great darkness spreading across the land like a plague of despair. The faces of the innocent victims, their eyes filled with terror and hope, seemed to swim before her consciousness, like fragments of broken glass reflecting the light of heaven itself. Each memory was a wound that bled with spiritual significance, each recollection a testament to the power of divine mercy that could transform even the deepest wounds into sources of healing. The voice that had spoken to her in the silence of the night had been both gentle and terrible, like the whisper of wind through sacred stones and the roar of a storm that could reshape mountains. "The hate you carry will destroy you," it had said, and the words had struck her soul like lightning, illuminating the truth that had been hidden from her until now. She had carried this burden for so long, believing that her strength lay in her ability to hold on to the anger, to make it her weapon against the darkness that sought to consume everything good in the world. But now, standing at the precipice of her final confrontation with the source of all evil, she understood the profound wisdom of the words that had echoed through the chambers of her spirit. The hatred she had nurtured, the righteous fury that had driven her to seek vengeance against those who had wronged her family and her people, was not a tool, but a prison. It was a cage made of her own pain, a fortress built from the ashes of her sorrow, and it was slowly suffocating the very light that had called her to this sacred mission. The spiritual journey that had brought her to this moment had been a crucible of transformation, each trial and tribulation serving as a purification fire that burned away the dross of her old self. She had learned to see beyond the surface of things, to perceive the interconnected web of divine love that bound all living souls together in an eternal dance of grace. The suffering she had endured, the losses she had experienced, were not meaningless tragedies, but rather the very soil from which the most beautiful flowers of compassion could bloom. As she approached the place where the darkness gathered its strength, Elena felt her heart opening wider than it had ever opened before, as if the barriers that had kept her separate from the universal flow of divine love were dissolving like morning mist before the rising sun. The hatred that had been her companion for so long began to lose its grip, replaced by an overwhelming sense of recognition of the divine spark that lived within every creature, including those who had caused her such pain. She understood now that true strength did not come from the ability to destroy, but from the capacity to create, to heal, to restore what had been broken. The Chosen One's mission was not to punish, but to redeem, not to condemn, but to forgive, not to conquer, but to unite. In the space between her heart and the universe, she felt the infinite love that had always been there, patient and waiting, ready to embrace the broken pieces of her shattered spirit and weave them into something more beautiful than she had ever imagined possible. The sacred fire within her chest began to flicker like a candle in the wind, its golden light trembling against the shadows that had taken root in her soul. Elena stood at the threshold of the ancient cathedral, her hands trembling as she pressed them against the weathered stone that had witnessed centuries of prayers and penitence. The morning light filtered through stained glass windows, casting kaleidoscopic patterns of crimson and gold across the marble floor, each hue a testament to the divine love that flowed through this hallowed space like a river of pure grace. She had been walking for 3 days, following the whisper of destiny that had begun to echo in her bones since the night her sister's lifeless body was laid to rest beneath the oak tree where they had once played as children. The weight of that loss had grown heavier with each passing moment, transforming from grief into something darker, a consuming hatred that had taken root in her heart and blossomed into something monstrous. She had blamed the world for her pain, blamed fate for its cruel indifference, blamed everyone but herself for the way her soul had been fractured beyond repair. But here in the sanctuary where countless souls had found their way back to divine mercy, she felt the first stirring of something ancient and eternal stirring within her breast. The air itself seemed to shimmer with holy presence, as if the very atmosphere was alive with prayers that had ascended from the earth to meet the throne of heaven. She closed her eyes and allowed herself to breathe deeply, feeling the breath fill her lungs with the essence of creation itself. The same breath that had given life to Adam and Eve, that had sustained the prophets, that had whispered secrets to the heart of God. Chosen One. The voice came not from without, but from deep within her spirit, a sound like silver bells ringing in the distance. The hate you carry will destroy you. Let go and embrace divine love. The words fell like gentle rain upon parched soil, awakening something that had been dormant for too long. Elena's knees buckled and she sank to the cold stone floor, her tears falling like pearls upon the sacred ground. The weight of her burden, the burden of her unforgiveness, suddenly felt too heavy to bear, and yet in that very moment of surrender, she felt something miraculous begin to unfold. Her hands, still pressed against the stone, began to glow with an inner radiance that seemed to emanate from the very core of her being. The warmth spread outward, touching every fiber of her existence until she could feel the divine light flowing through her veins like liquid fire. It was the same light that had touched the face of Christ during his transfiguration, the same light that had illuminated the darkness when the world was young, the same light that had been waiting patiently for her to return to it. As the tears continued to fall, she realized that the hatred she had carried was not a weapon, but a prison, a cage of her own making that had kept her from experiencing the fullness of divine love. The woman who had died beneath the oak tree was not the same woman who now knelt in the sacred place, for she had learned that forgiveness was not weakness, but strength, not surrender, but victory over the enemy that had sought to destroy her soul. In that moment, as the light of the divine filled her entire being, Elena understood that she had been chosen not for her suffering, but for her capacity to transform that suffering into something beautiful, something that would help others find their way home to the love that awaited them all. The sacred mission that had been placed upon her shoulders was not one of judgment, but of redemption, not of condemnation, but of healing, not of separation, but of reunion with the source of all being. The morning sun, now fully risen, cast its golden rays through the cathedral windows, and Elena felt herself being lifted upon a tide of celestial grace, carried toward a destiny that was both terrifying and glorious, for she knew that she would never be the same again, and that perhaps, just perhaps, she had been chosen to become a vessel through which divine love would flow into the world once more. The weight of divine purpose pressed upon her chest like the ancient stones of a cathedral nave, each breath a prayer that rose from the depths of her soul toward heaven she could barely comprehend. Elena stood at the threshold of her destiny, her hands trembling, not from fear but from the overwhelming magnitude of what she had been chosen to become. The voice that had called her from the shadows of doubt spoke again its timbre, like wind through sacred chambers, where the prayers of countless souls had been whispered into eternity. "You carry the burden of 1,000 broken hearts," it said, and she felt the truth of those words settle into her bones like scripture written in light. The hatred that had consumed her for so many years, her father's betrayal, her mother's abandonment, the world's cruel indifference had crystallized into something darker than mere anger. It had become a living thing, a consuming fire that burned away her capacity for love, her ability to see beyond the veil of pain that had wrapped itself around her heart like a shroud. But now, as she stood in the sacred space where the divine and human intersected, she began to understand that this hatred was not hers alone. It was the collective grief of humanity, the accumulated sorrow of every person who had ever felt abandoned, betrayed, or forgotten. She had become the vessel through which all these broken spirits could find their way back to light, and in doing so, she would discover that the very thing that had destroyed her was also the key to her salvation. The vision came then as clear as if she were looking through the eyes of God himself. She saw herself as a bridge between worlds, the chasm between darkness and light, between the despair that had defined her existence and the grace that awaited her. Her hands, once clenched in fists of vengeance, now opened slowly, revealing the palms that would soon bear the marks of her sacrifice. These wounds would not be signs of defeat, but of triumph, proof that she had chosen the path of love over the comfort of bitterness. In that moment, the spiritual dimensions of her calling became crystal clear. She was not merely a chosen one in the traditional sense, though she had been selected by forces beyond human understanding, but a conduit for divine mercy, a living testament to the transformative power of forgiveness. The hatred that had once seemed so absolute was revealed to be nothing more than the shadow cast by the light she had been meant to bring into the world. As she surrendered her grip on the past, Elena felt her spirit begin to ascend, drawn upward by invisible threads of celestial longing. The pain that had shaped her for so long began to dissolve like morning mist before the sun. Not because it had been erased, but because it had been transmuted into something far more beautiful. Each memory of hurt, each wound that had festered in her heart became a seed from which compassion would grow. She understood now that her mission was not simply to destroy the sources of evil, but to create a new paradigm, entirely one where love would be the dominant force, where the healing of broken souls would be the highest calling. The divine mandate within her was not about revenge or retribution, but about restoration, about bringing the scattered fragments of human consciousness back together under the banner of universal love. The choice before her was not between good and evil, but between the temporary comfort of hatred and the eternal joy of divine union. She had been given the opportunity to transcend her own limitations and become something greater than the sum of her suffering. In embracing this truth, she would discover that she was never truly separate from the divine source of all love, but rather an expression of it, a living prayer that had been waiting for the perfect moment to unfold. The weight of divine purpose pressed upon her chest like the burden of eternity itself, each breath a sacred struggle between mortal flesh and celestial calling. Seraphina's hands trembled as she clutched the ancient parchment, its edges worn smooth by countless prayers and tears, the words written in a language that spoke directly to her soul. The hatred she carried had become a living thing within her heart, a serpent that coiled around her ribs and fed on her anguish, growing stronger with every moment of vengeance she nurtured. In the dim light of the cathedral's stained glass windows, shadows danced across her face like the spirits of forgotten saints, their eyes following her movements with knowing compassion. She had been chosen, yes, chosen from the moment of her birth, when the heavens themselves had wept at her arrival, chosen to bear the weight of justice that no human hand could wield alone. But the weight was not meant to crush her spirit. It was meant to forge her into something transcendent, something holy. The voices in her mind, those whispers of divine purpose that had haunted her since childhood, grew louder now, speaking in languages older than memory itself. They told her of the great cosmic dance of the eternal balance that required both darkness and light, both judgment and mercy, both the fire of righteous anger and the warmth of unconditional love. She understood now that her mission was not merely to destroy evil, but to transform it, to take the hatred that others had cast upon her and transmute it into something beautiful, something that would illuminate the path for all who walked in darkness. Her reflection in the ancient mirror revealed a woman whose eyes held the depth of centuries, whose face bore the scars of battles fought not with swords, but with prayer. The hatred had carved itself into her soul like an etching. But she saw now that it was not the end of her story, it was merely the beginning of her redemption. Each painful memory, each moment of suffering, each tear shed in the name of justice, had been leading her toward this moment of transformation. The divine love that awaited her was not weak or sentimental, but fierce and unshakable, like the force that had created galaxies and held them together in perfect harmony. It was the love that could consume the very fires of hatred and turn them into light. The love that had been waiting patiently in the spaces between her heartbeats, in the silence between her prayers, in the breath that carried her life forward. She closed her eyes and felt herself being drawn into the vast tapestry of existence, seeing how every thread of her pain was connected to every thread of another's suffering, how every scar was part of the larger design of healing and restoration. The chosen one was not meant to be a vessel of destruction, but a conduit of divine mercy, a bridge between the world of shadows and the realm of light. In that moment of surrender, she understood that true strength lay not in holding onto the darkness, but in releasing it, completely trusting that the divine love would fill the void left behind with something infinitely more precious. The hatred she carried would indeed destroy her if she let it, but if she chose instead to embrace the love that was calling her home, she would become something greater than death itself, something that would echo through eternity like a song sung by the angels. The mission was clear now, not to carry the burden alone, but to become the vessel through which divine love would flow into a world that desperately needed healing. She would learn to walk in the way of the Lamb, yet possess the strength of the Lion, for she had been chosen not to destroy, but to restore, not to condemn, but to redeem. The weight of the world pressed upon her shoulders like the heavy mantle of prophecy, each step forward through the sacred corridors of her destiny, carrying the burden of ages past and futures yet to unfold. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird desperate for flight. Yet she understood that flight was not her calling. Her calling was to bear witness to the profound paradox of divine love, manifesting through human suffering, through the very darkness that had shaped her soul into something both beautiful and broken. The voice that had guided her from the moment of her birth echoed now through the chambers of her spirit, a whisper that grew louder with each passing hour, until it became a thunderous proclamation that shook the very foundations of her being. Chosen one, it intoned, not with judgment, but with infinite compassion. The hate you carry will destroy you. Let go and embrace divine love." In that moment, as the light of dawn pierced through the stained glass windows of the ancient cathedral where she had been summoned, Elena felt the weight of her own transformation crystallize within her chest. The hatred that had consumed her since childhood, the rage born from betrayal and abandonment, the fury that had driven her to seek revenge against those who had wronged her. These were not merely human emotions, but sacred vessels that had been filled with the very essence of divine justice. Yet even justice, when carried too long, becomes a prison. She closed her eyes and felt the presence of the divine flowing through her like a river of liquid light. Each drop of water carrying the memory of every tear shed in prayer, every sacrifice made in faith, every moment of surrender to something greater than herself. The Holy Spirit whispered to her heart, speaking in tongues that transcended language itself, revealing the truth that had been hidden beneath layers of pain and resentment. "Your wounds are not your condemnation," the voice said, soft as morning dew, but steady as the mountain peaks that watched over her journey. "They are the very marks that will lead others to salvation. Your pain has been sanctified by the very act of bearing. It transformed into a beacon of hope for those who walk in darkness." Elena's hands trembled as she reached toward the altar, her fingers brushing against the weathered wood that had witnessed countless prayers and penitences. She could feel the prayers of generations past flowing through the grain of the wood, their collective longing for redemption and peace, creating a tapestry of spiritual energy that connected her to every human soul that had ever sought divine mercy. The mission before her was not one of vengeance or retribution, but of healing, a mission that required her to become the very vessel through which divine love would flow into a world that had forgotten how to receive it. Her hate had been a crucible, refining her spirit until it was pure enough to contain the light that would eventually illuminate the hearts of all who would listen. As she stood there in the cathedral, bathed in golden light that seemed to emanate from within her own soul, Elena understood that the path ahead would not be easy. There would be moments when the weight of her responsibility would crush her spirit, when the voices of doubt would whisper that she was insufficient, that her wounds were too deep, that her story was too dark to become a source of light for others. But she also understood that the divine operates through paradox, that the very things that seem to destroy us often become the instruments through which we are most fully transformed. Her hate had been necessary not because it was good, but because it had prepared her for the love that awaited her. Like the phoenix that rises from its own ashes, she would emerge from this crucible of pain, not as someone who had simply survived, but as someone who had been transfigured into something more beautiful than she had ever imagined possible. The choice before her was not between holding onto her pain or releasing it, but between allowing her pain to define her or allowing it to refine her into a vessel capable of containing the infinite love that was waiting to flow through her life. And in that understanding, she felt the first stirrings of true freedom. The freedom that comes not from the absence of struggle, but from the willingness to transform struggle into service, to turn the darkness of her experience into the light that would guide others toward the divine embrace that awaited them all. The weight of divine calling pressed upon her chest like the ancient stones of Jerusalem, each breath a prayer that burned with the intensity of sacred fire. Sarah stood at the threshold of her destiny, her soul trembling with the magnitude of what awaited her across the sacred divide between human frailty and celestial purpose. The voices that had whispered to her since childhood now crescendoed into a symphony of heavenly orchestration, each note a reminder that she was not merely chosen, but called to bear the sacred burden of love's redemption. In the depths of her meditation, she felt the presence of the Divine Mother herself, her heart beating in rhythm with the cosmic pulse that connected all living souls. The hatred that had festered within her for so many years began to manifest as a physical weight, a black cloud that seemed to emanate from her very core. It was not merely personal vengeance or bitter resentment. It was the accumulated pain of generations, the collective sorrow of humanity's fallen nature carried forward through the centuries like a heavy mantle that refused to be shed. She understood now that her mission was not simply to destroy evil, but to transform it through the pure radiance of divine love. The darkness that had consumed her soul for so long was not her own creation, but rather the consequence of humanity's separation from its creator, the beautiful divine spark that had been scattered like seeds across the earth. Every act of cruelty, every moment of selfishness, every instance of hatred born from fear, these were not merely individual failures, but symptoms of a deeper spiritual malady that demanded healing. The sacred text spoke clearly to her soul. "The hate you carry will destroy you." The words echoed through eternity, carrying the weight of countless souls who had learned this painful truth. She saw visions of those who had walked this path before her, prophets and saints, whose hearts had been broken by the world's cruelty, yet who had chosen, instead of destruction, the path of forgiveness and love. They had understood that true power did not lie in retaliation, but in the courage to embrace the very darkness that sought to consume them. As the morning light filtered through the stained glass windows of the cathedral where she knelt in prayer, Sarah felt a transformation begin. Her hands, once clenched in fists of rage, now opened slowly to receive the grace that flowed like liquid starlight. The hatred that had been her companion for so long began to dissolve like snow beneath the warmth of spring's first rays. Each breath became a surrender, each heartbeat a declaration of faith in the divine plan that transcended human understanding. The spiritual mission that had been entrusted to her was not one of conquest or retribution, but of restoration, a calling to become a vessel for divine mercy, a bridge between the broken and the blessed, the lost and the found. She would not simply end the cycle of hatred. She would break its hold entirely, replacing it with the sacred dance of love that had been the original intention of creation itself. The weight of her calling grew lighter with each passing moment, as if the universe itself was conspiring to lift the burden from her shoulders. She felt the presence of countless souls who had walked this same path, their prayers joining hers in a chorus that reached the throne of heaven itself. In that sacred moment, she understood that she was not alone. She was part of something infinitely larger than herself, a tapestry woven from the threads of divine love that connected all beings in an eternal embrace. The weight of divine purpose pressed upon her chest like the crushing vastness of eternity itself, each breath a sacred struggle between mortal weakness and celestial calling. Seraphina's hands trembled as she clutched the ancient scroll, its parchment whispering secrets that had been buried for millennia beneath the sands of time and the dust of forgotten prayers. The symbols danced before her eyes, crystalline letters that pulsed with the heartbeat of creation itself. Each glyph a prayer that had never been spoken, a blessing that had waited patiently for someone worthy to carry its burden. She felt the hatred within her soul like a living thing, writhing and consuming, feeding upon the very essence of her being. It was not merely anger or resentment. It was the dark inheritance of generations who had walked this earth with broken hearts, whose pain had crystallized into something far more dangerous than simple malice. This was the accumulated sorrow of humanity, the collective grief of those who had been hurt, betrayed, abandoned, and left to rot in the darkness of their own despair. And now it lived within her, a grotesque marriage of human suffering and divine destiny. The voice came again, not from without, but from deep within her spiritual core, a whisper that carried the weight of all saints who had ever suffered for love, all martyrs who had endured the crucible of sacrifice. "Chosen one," it said, and the word resonated through her bones like the tolling of an ancient bell. "The hate you carry will destroy you." But even as the warning echoed in her consciousness, she understood that destruction was not merely annihilation, it was transformation. The hatred that had taken root in her heart was not meant to be extinguished like a candle, but transmuted into something greater, something that could illuminate the darkest corners of existence. She had been chosen not because she was perfect, but because she was broken, and broken things often become the most beautiful when mended by divine hands. As she stood there in the sanctum where the light of heaven seemed to pour through the very walls themselves, Serafina felt the weight of her calling shift from something terrible to something transcendent. The hatred within her was not her enemy. It was her teacher, her guide to understanding the true nature of divine love. For how could one truly comprehend the depths of mercy without first experiencing the heights of human cruelty? How could one know the warmth of forgiveness without having tasted the bitter cold of betrayal? The scroll began to glow with an inner fire that made her skin tingle with holy electricity. Each symbol pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat, and she realized that she was not simply reading ancient words, she was becoming part of something infinitely larger than herself. Her soul was being woven into the tapestry of divine purpose, thread by thread, her pain and her strength both becoming essential parts of a greater design. She closed her eyes and let the vision wash over her like a tide of grace. In her mind's eye, she saw the face of every person who had ever suffered, every child who had cried out in the night, every soul that had wandered lost in the wilderness of despair. And she understood that she was called to bear witness to their pain, not to add to it, but to transform it through the power of divine love. The choice before her was not whether to embrace love or hatred, but whether to allow her pain to define her or to use it as a bridge to healing. She had been given the sacred gift of witnessing the deepest wounds of humanity, and in doing so, she would become a vessel through which the divine light could shine brightest. The hate she carried was not her burden. It was her calling to carry the light that could heal what had been broken, to restore what had been lost, to bring hope where there had only been despair. With trembling hands, she began to write her pen